In this video, we'll take a look at an old radio I acquired and restored some years ago, an Eveready Model 32. This is an Eveready Model 32 radio made in 1929 or 1930. It's in a wooden highboy type cabinet in a walnut finish. The front panel is made of pressed rep wood with the Eveready name imprinted on it. The tuning is via a large wooden knob with a movie dial surrounded by a brass escutcheon. Two gain controls are provided. These knobs are bakelite. A large speaker is at the bottom of the cabinet and exposed through a grill. Branded as Eveready and made by the National Carbon Company of Canada, at the time the parent company of Eveready, it's an 8-tube TRF design that's AC line powered and receives the AM broadcast band from 550 to 1600 kHz. Lloyd Swackhammer's book Radios of Canada has an entry for the Canadian National Carbon Company. Based in Toronto, they manufactured Eveready radios in Canada, possibly in this building in Toronto, which came from Google Street View at the same address. They made 10 models of 30, 40, and 50 series in 1929 and 1930. The radios were distributed by Aikenhead Hardware, Purser Bull & Company, and Lewis Brothers in Quebec. The nameplate on my unit says Canadian National Carbon Company, Montreal, Winnipeg, Toronto, Calgary, Vancouver, and indicates it was licensed under several radio patents. The 30 series was offered as models 31, 32, and 33, with different cabinet styles but the same electronics. The Model 31 was a tabletop version that required an external speaker. The Model 32, this unit, was a highboy and a cabinet with a walnut finish. The Model 33 was a larger and more expensive console with more decorative carvings. The U.S. list price in 1929 was, according to one source, $175, equivalent to about $2,700 today, and that didn't include the tubes. Front panel controls are very simple. A toggle switch controls power. Tuning is via a large wooden knob which moves a movie type dial that rotates within a window and is lit from the back. A translucent strip of plastic or celluloid rotates. It's marked from 0 to 100 as well as frequency in kilohertz. The knob on the left controls volume, and the knob on the right is an antenna trimmer that's adjusted for maximum signal. The sound comes out the speaker behind the grill below. On the rear there's a standard 2-prong power plug. At the left there are binding posts for ground and short and long wire antennas. A piece of wire inside the radio, or extended slightly as seen here, could be used as the antenna. To receive more than just local stations, you would typically use an external long wire antenna and ground connection. There's a phono input which would allow connecting the unit to a record player turntable to be played through the unit's amplifier. The power supply has a pin that's inserted to select for 105, 115, or 125 volt input, whatever was closest to the line voltage in your area. The loudspeaker connects via 4 wires, 2 for the voice coil and 2 for the field coil that generates the magnetic field. Somewhat unusual is the fact that it's constructed from 2 separate chassis that are linked together. One contains the power supply and audio output, the other has the RF amp detector and first AF amp stages. Possibly this was to allow sharing the chassis with other models. It also provided shielding between the RF and AF circuits, which were prone to feedback and oscillation in TRF designs. The 8 tubes are visible, including one which has a shield. Here you can see the back of the tuning indicator. There are 2 clips on the back that indicated that it might have originally had a back cover, but I've been unable to confirm this with any known pictures of the model. This is a TRF, or tuned radio frequency design, that predated the superheterodyne or superhet design that later became standard for most radios. The design uses multiple stages that were tuned at and amplified at the received radio frequency signal, hence tuned radio frequency, followed by a detector or demodulator stage, and then several audio frequency amplifier stages to drive headphones or a speaker. The circuit uses 3 RF amplifier stages, each using a 27 triode tube and coupled to the next stage using a transformer. Unlike some early TRF radios which had multiple tuning dials, the 3 tuned circuits are ganged, so only a single tuning control is required. The detector is also a type 27 triode, as is the first audio frequency amplifier. The second and final audio amplifier is 2 71A tubes in a push-pull arrangement with input and output transformers and driving a large speaker with a field coil rather than a permanent magnet. A power transformer generates the high voltage as well as the tube filament voltages. The input has a tap with 3 positions to select the line voltage being used. The power supply uses an 80 dual triode tube with choke and capacitor filtering to generate the high voltage for the tubes. The filter choke is the loudspeaker field coil. In July of 2004, I saw an ad in the local community newspaper about an antique radio and arranged to see it. When I found out it was a console, I wasn't sure I was interested in it, but the owner was insistent to find a home for it, so I took it since it might otherwise just be thrown out. I was able to find a circuit diagram in the Rider's Perpetual Troubleshooting Manual Volume 1 under the National Carbon Company. I cleaned inside of the chassis. The wiring around the power switch was in bad shape and replaced. One of the tubes was missing, so I ordered and installed a replacement. I had to replace a bad resistor in the power supply and another in the audio amplifier circuit. I replaced some wax paper caps and the electrolytic filter caps with new ones, as these are prone to failing. Alignment was done using information from the book Modern Radio Servicing by Girardi. The book, written in 1936, notes that TRF receivers of this type were obsolete. The alignment included the steps for neutralization, which is needed for this type of receiver, sometimes called a Neutrodyne design. To make it safer, I wired an inline fuse holder into the AC circuit and installed a 1 amp fuse. The Type 80 rectifier tube sometimes short, which could result in damaging the hard-to-replace power transformer and other circuitry unless the radio is fused. After alignment, it picked up local AM radio stations with decent volume with only the piece of wire for an antenna, and the tracking of frequencies on the dial was reasonably accurate.
It has been pushed back to 10 o'clock. Okay, we're going to carry it for you. We'll have it for you. City News. Keep in mind the context of all of this. This is the first time Doug Ford has
where you aimed most of the time. You can be a pretty good putter.
Yeah, we're actually out of time, Jake, and golf, putting, like, we could talk for another hour.
This is the oldest radio that I own and the only TRF design. Restoring it, I learned a lot about the design and operation of this type of circuitry. It's impressive that it's getting close to 100 years old and it still picks up current AM radio stations.